All right, let's talk Michigan Wolverines football, obviously in the middle of their bye week right now. But look, they're not resting, right? They're taking advantage of this opportunity to make massive moves, to add some more quality players, including pulling off some massive steals potentially. We'll get into all that news. Good sign for Michigan in just a second. But first, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, this Michigan Wolverines football team, listen, going into a bye, of course, trying to get things squared away after a disappointing win. Still got the win. Everything the Wolverines want is certainly still in front of them, but obviously they need to figure some things out. But like all great programs, they're constantly focused on opportunities to improve their roster. And to that end, I think the Wolverines have pulled off one of the more underrated steals of the recruiting cycle as it sits. Let's get into this report here, and then we'll talk about more what it means on the other side. This report is courtesy of GBM Wolverine. Aiden Reeder has committed to the Michigan football program, officially completing a flip as Reeder was committed to Wisconsin as recently as Sunday. Yet, the 6'3", 215-pound linebacker from Cincinnati, Ohio, reopened his recruitment after a visit to Michigan football, and on Thursday, he announced his commitment. "I'm home," Reeder wrote in a social media post. All right, so what this means for Michigan, Reeder's one of these guys that doesn't get a lot of buzz, doesn't get a lot of attention. There's not a lot of focus on him as one of the top 3, 4, 5-star prospects, not even close. Some recruiting services, don't even have him in the top 500. But he's a late bloomer. He's one of these guys that I love for teams to go after and attack early, because there was a lot of buzz building with Reeder recently. A lot of programs getting interested. He's a guy that kind of slid under the radar for a long time. This happens with a lot of high school kids, right? Look, we're dealing with 15, 16, 17-year-olds. Look, I know this personally, playing college football myself. I was a nothing of a recruit at all until basically my senior season. I was an offensive lineman, and I was 215 pounds. My junior season, right? Again, that's you don't need me to tell you that's 215, not 315, right? So I had a lot of room to grow, and I did, and that's when some coaches started to notice me, and my recruiting picked up a little bit at the time. And we see this all the time in the world of college football, right? A recruit's a 5-star as a junior in high school, sophomore in high school, because he's already 6'6", or he already runs a 4.4, or he's already 245 pounds as a defensive end, because he started puberty at 9 or something ungodly like that. But there's a lot of guys out there that are late bloomers, guys that are figuring out football and growing physically. We're talking about kids here. Of course they're going to grow. Of course they're going to, develop their skill sets as they work their way through high school. And that's exactly what Reeder has done. To a man, you can research Aiden Reeder. Every single profile says lower level recruit for the longest time, and now his interest has spiked. Why? Because he's filling out. He's becoming a better football player. He's making plays left and right on the football field, and multiple Big Ten programs are starting to take notice. Give credit to Michigan, and national programs as well are taking notice, and give credit to Michigan for taking advantage of this opportunity and securing him now. This is the equivalent, guys, of a draft steal, right? Talk about the steals. Michigan, you know all about that, of course. Tom Brady, greatest draft steal of all time. 6th-round pick becomes an all-time great. Even if that's an extreme example, 5th-round pick, 7th-round picks that become stars. Aiden Reeder has the potential to be that kind of steal. You're talking about a guy that doesn't even crack the top 500 according to some recruiting services, but I think he's a 3, 4-star, easily top 150 kind of player. And right now, Michigan got him with putting in relatively limited resources. And that's why it's so important to get these recruits, get these steals. Because you get a guy like Reeder, who's basically, in my opinion, going to be a top 200, top 150 kind of player, and you didn't have to put in that kind of resources. You won them without having to, put in a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, fighting off a bunch of other programs. Now that you got them, you can free up the resources across the rest of your recruiting class to fill out your roster for the future. So this is just really good roster management by Michigan. And again, recruiting. I know people talk about the transfer portal, people talk about NIL, but long-term success in college football still is, and I think always will be, even though it loses a lot of the luster in terms of the glitz and glamour we've seen of yesteryear, but recruiting will always still be the most important thing. Michigan, Sherrone Moore, and his staff getting it done here. But this isn't the only example of Michigan doing some good things in the recruiting world. Let me pull up this report also from GBM Wolverine. Quarterback recruiting is the lifeblood of any successful college football program. You can't win without big-time talent at that position. That's pretty obvious. Michigan football learned that lesson during the 2024 season. It also learned from some of the mistakes that led to that. That's how the Wolverines were able to eventually land Bryce Underwood. The door opened, and Michigan was aggressive in securing its quarterback of the future. The Wolverines have continued to recruit the quarterback position well, though, as they should. Four-star Peter Bork is a top 100 prospect in the 2027 class. He looks like another elite find. He could be the heir apparent to Bryce Underwood. However, another name to know in the 2020 class is number 1 quarterback Jaden Wade. Again, this is Jaden Wade, number 1 quarterback in the country. Very interesting there. The report goes on to say Wade is ranked 5th overall in the 2028 class, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Rankings. He's number 1 quarterback. He will announce his commitment on November 18th among Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, Oregon, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. That's per Rivals. It's a star-studded group of teams, obviously. You wouldn't think that Florida would be a serious contender. Probably not. Not with their coaching change. They're probably done. I would have a hard time seeing Washington win out, although Jed Fish is a QB guru. Just look at what he's done with Damon Williams. Yeah, I agree. Fish has done a great job, but I don't see Washington win that one either. Michigan is a serious threat, though. According to E.J. Holland of the Wolverine, Michigan is for sure a team that I'm looking at, said Wade. So again, Michigan's in the running, right? It may not be the favorite, and as the report says in a second right here, it's obviously very early in the process, but with the decision 2 weeks away, it feels like Michigan football is a serious contender to land the number 1 overall quarterback for the second time in 4 classes. So this would obviously be a big win for the Michigan Wolverines. And look, I don't know if it's going to happen. There's a lot of predictives that are being made from all these analysts in the recruiting world saying Michigan is not a heavy favorite, and maybe they're not. But the reality is for a Wolverines program that, again, a lot of people expected after the Harbaugh departure, after 2024, and especially with that, the scandal, and put it in air quotes, of course, because we all know it's garbage. I'm not a Michigan fan. I didn't go to Michigan, right? We cover all kinds of teams on this channel. We do it all the time. We cover Ohio State. We cover Nebraska. We cover other Big Ten programs, right? Not a Michigan channel at all. Hopefully it doesn't turn any of you Michigan fans off. But the reality is we all know that was garbage, right? We can all be honest with ourselves and be grown-ups and say, yeah, that whole scandal was silly and stupid and a waste of time and money on everybody's part. And yet, despite all that, despite all the hoopla, Michigan, again, they got Underwood last year, and they seem to be winning recruiting battles again. We're talking about recruiting steals early on, and now we see a big-time recruiting win for Michigan when it comes to Wade and what he could provide for this Wolverines team going forward. Now, look, do I think they're going to get Wade? My guess is probably not. But the fact that they're even in the running continues to just show that Michigan, a lot of people think their demise is imminent after Harbaugh and all that kind of stuff, like I've just mentioned. The reality is they're still one of the top programs in the country. They're still clearly a blue blood. They're still going to be a force for many years to come. All right, we got more to break down here, folks. But first, Michigan fans, I want to ask you guys in the comment section below. Obviously, at this point, there's been a lot of good this season, a lot of disappointing as well, a little bit of a mixed bag. But give us, I'll say it like this, what's the bright spot that you've seen from the Wolverines now that we're in the bye week and you can, take a beat to look around and say, okay, what do I think about this team? Give us a bright spot for this Wolverines program and where they sit right now. Just a guy who's emerged as maybe a guy you didn't expect or a guy who's overperformed. Give us that guy. Give us that bright spot in the comment section below. But while we're talking about recruiting and we're talking about Michigan and a long-term trajectory, and listen, talk about doing great moves, talking about steals, talking about potentially getting a top quarterback, let's focus on the here and now. Because right now, a lot of people say Michigan, disappointing team, they're not going to get anywhere, right? The 2 losses really hurt them, especially not looking good against Purdue. Is the season over? When you look at the data, when you look at ESPN's FPI, and guys, I kind of like using FPI. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of ESPN and what they do, but I think it's a good metric because it aligns with the analytics that a lot of college football playoff committee people really like. I think it's actually a handy tool. And you can see on the screen right here the top 20 teams right now according to FPI in the country. So you have Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, Oregon 3, Alabama 4, Notre Dame 5, Georgia 6, Utah 7, Texas, A&M, USC, Texas Tech, Miami, Ole Miss, BYU, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Vandy, Missouri, Michigan, and then Iowa. So obviously Michigan's still in the running, right? 19th right now in FPI in the country. Obviously need to get to about 10 or 9 unless they win the Big Ten to get in there. And listen, their goals are right in front of them because they have an opportunity, obviously, to make a massive leap if they beat Ohio State yet again at the end of the season. Obviously, a tall task, but to be totally honest, they did it last year, and I thought it was a taller task. So I'm not betting against Michigan at all in that game. Ohio State's got to prove they can beat Michigan, if I'm being totally honest, mentally and physically, before I'll even consider picking Ohio State. And the Buckeyes, again, not a fan of the Buckeyes or a fan of Michigan. I'm an FCS guy personally, D1AA guy personally. I know that may surprise a lot of people. There are fans of that level of football. But the reality is, Ohio State, to me, as good as they are, until they prove they can handle Michigan, I'm not seeing them as a serious football team, a serious championship team. Maybe they prove me wrong. I don't think they will. I think Michigan is too physical for them, and I think Underwood is a better quarterback than his performance, at least last week, would lead you to believe. I think he's going to continue to get better, and I like Michigan's chances here to run the table. And that puts Michigan in an interesting spot, of course. I think that gets them in the college football playoff. I think they're one of these dark horse teams, because if you look across the SEC right now, I don't think Texas gets in, if I'm being totally honest. Miami's out of it at this point. I think Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss feel like the teams that get in. USC, I think, is going to drop another one, if I'm being honest. Missouri, Vandy, Oklahoma, Tennessee, they're above Michigan in the FPI, but I think they're going to drop a couple more games and they're not going to be in the mix. So, there's a really good chance just by hanging around here till the last week of the season, Michigan finds himself in the top 15, top 13, and then get a big win over Ohio State, and I think you get in. Now, look, that's a tall task. That's not easy. That's challenging, of course, and you got to handle business. Michigan certainly does the rest of the way. But the reality is, I think they're set up better than a lot of people understand. Bryce Underwood should theoretically, and I believe this, only get better, right? They have a talented physical running back. I know injuries are piling up. I get it. But everyone's beat up, right? It's that time of the year, right? You're deep into November. It's a war of attrition across the board for pretty much every single team. This is where the physical toughness and the adversity comes into play. And this is, if there's one thing Michigan knows, it's how to handle adversity. They've proven it year in and year out for the better part of the last half decade. There's no team in college football, and I truly believe this, better suited mentally to handle adversity than the Wolverines. They just have it ingrained in the program's DNA, and I think they can bounce back from, again, 2 losses, a disappointing game against Purdue. They got the win, but of course it was extremely ugly. I think there's a great chance they roll into Ohio State, against Ohio State, I should say, with those 2 losses and a chance to win and really make some noise. And listen, they're a team that's dangerous because they're physical. They can play defense. They can run the football, and they've got a quarterback that's only playing better. I say all that to say I'm not predicting them to win a national championship or anything like that, but they are a dangerous team, and they're one of those classic teams that no one's going to want to play if they get in. And guess what, Michigan fans? Here's the best part about this whole deal is, however 2025 shakes out, 2026 and the out years are going to just be even better and better because this team is trending in the right direction, and the recruiting, like I mentioned earlier in this video, is still top-notch. All in all data points, all indications are full speed ahead for this Wolverines program, making big moves. Credit to Sean Moore and his staff for getting it done.